We'll see. Anybody do it? Mike can.
Okay, folks, I'm getting a signal here for Quantum Leap, and I'm just checking my phone. I never believe it till I see it on my phone. But we are live here, and welcome to the new year with Quantum Leap and with David and Cory. And we have our special guest Pradnya Leitner on today, who is my business coach from a few years ago, and we still keep in touch on stuff. And she was probably interested in this new program because she'll recognize a lot of those concepts. And as we're going to talk about that. But first, I wanted to have Cory do a quick check-in. And sorry we missed everyone at 11. Cory's a bit under the weather, and we decided to just keep it to this segment with Pradnya. And we're going to talk more about industry leader on the ripple effect, but also in the future. Cory,
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Cory not here. Yeah, that's right. I got a little rest in between time. We just got back from Disneyland, and I think that took it kind of all out of me. So chasing a 3-year-old around at my age. Anyway, it's great. Keeps me young. And so I am Cory Knott with Take Wing Coaching and a business coach.
Okay, great. And I'm just trying to bring up this document here. My name's David Kirsten, and I have a couple new coaching programs that we've been talking about on air, and we're going to continue to talk about them. We actually didn't get all the way through Rising Star before the break, but I'm just going to pull up this slide here with industry leader real quick. And just so folks can just get their heads around it real quick, because I do ask Pradnya about a few of the concepts in this program. And I'll just pull up this slide real quick, and hopefully it works without issue. Okay, so we have the Brandenburg Gate here. It's intended to be kind of a global program, and that's a significant gate there in Berlin. About if you look up the history of that city, it actually goes back to the Prussian Empire. But it's really it's similar to Rising Star, but it's really geared towards people who want to be industry leaders. So it's kind of a different clientele, and it's really 13 modules, and it's a coaching program over 6 months. And it's really about what makes an industry leader and how to become one. And, I'd probably say I'd started working on this specifically the last year, or actually 3 years probably, but it's really been kind of all my life's knowledge of biographies and working in politics. And kind of the original impetus goes back to this working in California politics, when we would talk about leadership, and nobody wanted to develop better leaders on the business community side. So I figure we actually need to have better business leaders who see the value, and better political leaders. So that's kind of one of the peripheral intents. But I won't go into all the details, but really, the kind of nuts and bolts of vision, and you guys recognize all this stuff. We're going to talk about it in greater detail in the future. But with that, I'm going to get right to Pradnya and have her introduce herself. And she's really our visionary business leader guest for this month. And she's a very special person. We've had her on the air for a number of times, and she's really in large part helped me turn my life and business around when I started working with her, and all the powerful concepts that she knows, and combining those with the knowledge that Cory knows really made all the difference in my life. And with that, I want to welcome you back, Pradnya. And if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about you, and if you have any initial comments on the industry leader as well, feel free to make those.
Absolutely. First of all, it's amazing to be here again. As David introduced, my name is Pradnya Leitner. I'm a mindset and a business and personal success coach. And I'm really excited to be on this show, or in this interview today, because we can really dive deeper into the meaning of what leadership entails, and not in a theoretical way, but more from an application perspective. So David, to first answer your question, what does it mean to be an industry leader? How does one become an industry leader? Some of the thoughts that came to my mind is that the industry leader really has to be driven by purpose, vision, and a goal. And a purpose is something that's greater than themselves, that gets them out of the bed, that really gets them all ignited from within. That's purpose. Vision is multiple ways, or a plethora of ways in which they can see their purpose being materialized. And then a goal is a chunk out of that vision. So if the vision is a long tunnel view of how the leader is really going to make an impact, a contribution, serve people in an exemplary way, goal is in any given period of time, how are they going to materialize that vision and thereby live in alignment with their purpose? Does that make sense? So again, the vision, or rather the industry leader, to me, is somebody who is driven by purpose, vision, and a goal. And my request to our audience is that in case if you haven't uncovered your purpose in a concrete way, do not discount yourself from being an industry leader, because it's an act of pursuit. It unravels itself. It doesn't necessarily fall on your lap, but if you're open to it, you uncover it, you discover it, you discern it. So just be in a pursuit of that. I would also say that an industry leader is not driven by an ego. They're driven by service. Their maniacal focus is on, how can I solve this problem? How can I serve my clients, my stakeholders really in an exemplary way? And when I say ego, they're least interested in just brute forcing their ideas forward. That, in my opinion, is not leadership. They're really driven by giving, or applauding, or really weighing the idea that is based on its merit. And so if somebody's idea in a group setting is better than their own idea that they originated or conceptualized, they're willing to change their opinion of, what needs to happen, or they're willing to embrace somebody else's idea. But at the same time, if their idea comes out of conviction and they have an absolute knowing, not a belief, because belief can be binary. Knowing is something from within. If they have a knowing, they're also not hesitant to persuade people that can really benefit from it and help people see the truth in it. That's what I would say. Industry leaders also have great attitude. And by that, I mean, it's not that they're not greeted by problems or challenges. Nobody is an exception to it. I mean, all of us, we're going to come across challenges. We're not immune to it. But because they have their attitude down pat, they're guided from inside out. They see the challenges and the problems, but their maniacal focus, their sole focus is on solution. And thereby they can conceptualize them, embrace them, put them into practice. And last couple of things that I'll say is that I'll summarize on this point my understanding of an industry leader. David, you and I talked about it several times. Confidence comes from knowing. We know we can drive well, right? Confidence comes from knowing. Self-confidence comes from knowing oneself, right? And when I say confidence comes from knowing, there are three parts. There's knowledge / expertise. Number 2, mindset. Number 3, skill set. And so if you apply that to self-confidence, you have to have knowledge of who you are. You have to be the expert on you as to where your drawbacks are, where your strengths are, where your areas of growth are. You have to know how to guide your psychology. That's the mindset piece. In any endeavor we take on in life, whether it's marriage and relationship, or health and fitness, or business and professional growth, you've got to know the psychology behind it. And then the last part is the skill set. And particularly because we're speaking to the business audience, one needs to have understanding of what it entails to run a business and various aspects of it. And this is where, David, it is absolutely critical that the industry leader, once they know that's where they're going and that's who they want to be, that they're in an active pursuit of becoming.
Yeah, and I'll just say a brief testimonial actually for both your program and Cory's program, that you need something to set kind of the game plan for your life and your business. And that's what you did for me. And that's what Cory also did for my business in terms of the nuts and bolts, that it really can't be underestimated, the value of a kind of an outside program to really jumpstart you and get you headed in the right direction. I think, was it Bob Proctor, your mentor, says, well, if you ask like only like a few out of 100 people, if you ask them on the street what their goal is, they'll have a goal. So a big part is like charting the direction, the vision, all that kind of core work will get you started. And you don't need to be in a coaching program your whole life. But, I'll put a kind of wild card question to you about the program that you offer, why that is so important to really get people kind of started on the right direction.
I think we briefly touched upon it, but a great question. We talked about self, right? Cory and David, you would agree with me when I say self, we're not referring to our names. When I say self, it's not my name. It's not the body that I live in. It's way beyond. So once you really understand the nature of the self and the ways in which it operates your life, runs your life, you really get in the driver's seat. Because then you understand the self has the ability to observe your own thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs. It can spot how you use your imagination or not, so on and so forth. It can really help you get hold of what you're expecting. It can help you have great attitude. So without understanding of that self and how to grow yourself, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. When you're attempting to go after, and particularly your program is referred to as a quantum leap, to be able to make a quantum leap, you've really got to know yourself so that you can play to your strength and really grow.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic in that I call a lot of these things quantum leap, but I think the real progress actually comes from a series of small changes. I was reading this great book, Atomic Habits, which if you guys haven't heard of that book, you should pick it up. It's amazing. But, about if we just change 1% of each of the things we do and make it that much better, that was kind of responsible for the Brits winning like 5 out of 6 Tour de France's, the same like philosophy. So it's really about the processes. And I know you stress that, Cory stresses it, and I stress it in my program about how do you have that vision, but then you have these processes that you got to be driven through. And if you have any follow-up to that, feel free, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cory.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up there. Here's the thing. And again, we're going back to the self, because all of us understand here, the outer physical reality is really in big chunk guided by your internal state, how you're mending your inner world. And so when we don't know that we really have a great deal of control over what we will bring about in our experience, whether in terms of revenue, whether in terms of clients we serve, whether in terms of successes that we would have, then we don't even let ourselves step out of the box. But once we understand that we really are in the driver's seat and have that underlying, principle, then we can really go after lofty goals, which on the outskirts might seem lofty, but in reality, it's just a matter of becoming, improving yourself bit by bit by bit in habits, in execution, in having the persistence and perseverance to explore different strategies and see the one that's a great fit for you, so on and so forth. So unless and until we go to the core, no matter how hard we try in succeeding in one or the other strategy, it's not guaranteed. But once we get to the root cause, it's a given, it's inevitable.
Cory, I'm going to hand it over to you if you have any thoughts on that process. I know you and Gail are big on that, and that you're great on helping always keep me on track with process, but feel free to make any comments and then ask Pradnya whatever is on your mind.
Yeah, I was kind of focusing on this connected purpose because I want to hear what Pradnya has to say about because we're hearing it a lot now. This word purpose, it's coming up more and more. I think we're kind of on the forefront of it a few years ago, and then suddenly it's build your community with purpose, do this with purpose, and maybe COVID had something to do with that. As more people get online, there's more of this information going around. And I'm not necessarily certain that everybody knows what it means or how they go about doing it. And hearing it from different people is very important in terms of, where we connect and get that spark, because it just takes that one spark, and finding it can be sometimes finding a needle in a haystack. So what do you have to say about that, Pradnya?
There are so many thoughts that are coming to my mind. I would just say that, Cory, if we tie it back again to the concept of being an industry leader, right, nobody falls out of the sky becoming an industry leader or being an industry leader. You become that. So from that standpoint, I think vision is a destination that we set in our mind. Our self-image is the GPS that keeps us on course and keeps us in pursuit, even when things can look, not so pleasant in the middle, right? And purpose is the fuel that fuels that vehicle. And so without purpose, we can have great destination in mind and we can have GPS, but how are you going to move your car? And maybe for our audience, if we have to really oversimplify it, if you are a business owner, an industry leader, if you're an industry leader, you know this, you have embodied it and you're living it. But if you're a business owner, a corporate professional, a corporate leader, it's critically important to give yourself the permission to gain absolute crystal clear clarity with your destination. And that is where people usually sandbag or negotiate and bring it down because they don't understand what they're capable of doing. Again, going back to the self. Once they understand that, they might be greeted with a lot of obstacles and challenges. So if that's, the case, but they're never deterred by it. They're never thrown out or off by it. If I may, again, quote, Ray Dalio in his book, Principles, articulates it beautifully, Cory. No industry leader or business owners or corporate leaders' journey is like this. And if you know of one, please let me know. Okay. No one's journey is like this. Their journey, Cory, if you look at my finger right here, it's like this, like this, like this. So there are ups and there are downs. And if the person has their why clearly mapped out in their mind, who are they serving? How is, the lives of people that they're going to serve is going to be impacted and changed by what they're doing? How's their life going to be changed by what they're doing? What's the contribution, impact, legacy they're going to leave behind when their eternal journey continues, right? When they have so much fuel in them, and when they're making these loops, they would never quit on themselves, ever, So that's what I would say. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't necessarily see it any different. I just would explain it differently. And that's, I think, when we do this show is so we can hear different perspectives on that. I'm really, really big on the why and discovering that, and really the deeper why, especially for those of us who want to serve and serve deeply or help with transformation. So that deeper why then shows that we've been on the same journey that we expect to take our clients on. And,
yeah, absolutely.
I guess the next ask is, so so why would you say it's important then to construct the vision? So as we start to kind of develop that purpose, we get the why, and then we construct the vision. I would see it as, it's definitely required for leadership. But what else would you add to that for good leadership?
Vision is another absolutely critical component in that process of becoming an industry leader, because people want to follow people who know where they're going.
Right.
Number two, industry leader is entrusted with creating a movement, not overnight, but over time. And not for their own ego, but for the greater good of humanity and the constituency that they're serving. And if that's the case, unless and until the leader has the vision, how are they going to really imbibe that into their followers? Because that is what gives the followers the fuel that they need to stay on course, stay on path, even when they have to go through tremendous amount of growth. Right? So that's that. Also, I mean, let's, bring it down, tone it down a little bit. Let's say you're a business owner and you have your contribution targets, revenue targets set for the following year, okay? Or maybe even this year. And you have to get your employees, your leadership team, your executives on board, enrolled into that vision. And once it becomes the cumulative vision, then everybody is marching to the same tunes, rowing toward the same destination. And again, we've all heard it. I think it's comes from scriptures. Without vision, people will perish. Helen Keller puts it beautifully. Person who's way more unfortunate than being blind is a person who doesn't have a vision. And if we oversimplify it, Cory, let's say we love paddling in. Let's say we're going to go on a trip to Minnesota to paddle in Boundary Waters Canoe area. Okay. Now we have a destination, and then we start our journey. If there's a detour, we know how to get ourselves back and where we're headed. We don't say, hey, let's just go to Arizona and then from there see what's the next step. So vision just gives that absolute clarity so that as we chart our course, should we get off track, as we must, as we should, then vision keeps us on track.
Right.
Yeah. And I say as we should, not because we're cursed or anything, but if we're really becoming an industry leader and doing things that we've never done before, or rather wanting to have things that we've never had before, then we're going to do things we've never done before. And when we're doing something for the first time or just for the first few times, we might have, a big miss, or we might miss something, right? So again, the vision is a critical part to, stay the course, I would say.
I'll just add something real quick, Cory, that I think the framework is so important. And that's what I tried to do with Industry Leader. And that's what you and Pradnya do. That, when you look at the lives without a framework, if you look at the lives of like Ford or Edison, you might go, well, it was just hard work and then they made it. But if you have this scientific system of vision, purpose, all the things that some of these great business leaders do, you see that there was a lot more to it in generating that success than just kind of one thing. They have all these components, the habits, the daily practice, the vision, the self-image. And if they didn't have it right away, they developed it over time. So I think that's why it's so important to give the framework of just start looking at everything that you see in life through this kind of lens.
Dave, if I may comment on that framework piece, we use that word even throughout this conversation several times, becoming. How do you become something? By being that person in the now moment consistently, persistently. And that's where, again, it goes back to what you're referring to, David, that Cory and I focus on framework. That's why when we worked together, you had absolute clarity as to what your goal is. You knew the habits you had to develop, spiritual, mental, execution level. You knew how your mind or brain functions and how you can work with it and not become prey to it. You understood what it means to not be deterred by the circumstance, but rather really use your own thinking and your mind, your ability to conceptualize to get over the problem. You then created the self-image. You are willing to take on the challenges and do things you've never done before. You face the fear, right in its, or in its track. So, and assumed a great attitude. And this is what I mean by, it all might sound really one word, one sentence, but there is a deep process to each of these components. And once we understand, then it's like being a pilot in a cockpit who understands which buttons to press when there's turbulence versus when there are clear skies.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning there might be one thing that's missing, like maybe it's one bad habit, or so it's kind of like baking. If you don't have all the ingredients, it's not going to turn out right. So you need somebody to kind of give you the ingredients and almost like go back and watch you bake that cake, or bake the bread until you can get it. Just a quick time check. We have about 4 minutes, Cory. I think we'll be good if she keeps these last two brief. So
Maybe we can wrap it up on just briefly touching upon daily practice. I think if our listeners or viewers can just take some of these with them, and they might seem mundane or trivial, but hear us out that following these practices will make a world of difference, because it'll give you the ability to stay in control of your psychology, thereby the actions you will take, and thereby ultimately the results you will create. So I would just say, in terms of daily practices, engage in gratitude. And in a sentence or two, we talked about it, as we undertake as industry leaders things that we have never done before, failure or drawback or setback or obstacles are imminent. But when we work on ourselves, then the meaning that we give to the failure is just a feedback. So going back to gratitude, when you're immensely involved in a solid gratitude practice, you're really grateful for how far you've come. Your focus is on the gain, and thereby you can close the gap, which is where you want to head into or head toward. And so again, gratitude is a great practice. Recalling moments in your life where you overcame challenges, call it whatever you want to call, but document that so you can look back on how you did. Really working on your mindset every day, whether it's taking time to go within and meditate, or have a study course that you study to really bring rigor to your mind and to your execution. I would say those are some of the things. And then absolutely have your calendar mapped out so you can make sure that your execution is backing up the inner work that you're doing. Yeah.
It's almost like an Olympic athlete, if you want to win a gold medal in swimming, look at Michael Phelps, what his workouts looked at. You're not going to get there right away, but that gives you an idea of what it kind of takes.
Yeah. And I would add one more thing. It goes back to what Pradnya was talking about and what we're talking about, becoming versus being. And when you write these things down, you have your statement of purpose, you have your vision, and you have these written, and that's part of your daily or weekly. Just get it done. When you put it into your mind as something, this is who I am in the future, your mind isn't really so good at delineating between present and future, right? It's like affirmations. So if your vision becomes an affirmation, you're actually being that thing when you read it, and then it just infuses into you. So rather than looking at it as becoming, look at it as being that as much as you can be.
In closing, David, Cory just took us home. That being part is so critical, and we didn't even touch upon it, but we're all part of this universe. So regardless of how much we understand about thoughts and emotions, we can't deny the fact that thought is an most powerful form of energy. It's an electrical charge. Emotion is another potent energy, has magnetic charge. And so going back to what Cory is saying, when you're assuming and being in that B-E-I-N-G, being in that state, you're literally bringing toward you the things that you need for the realization of your goal that you can act on. So your dream is birthed.
Right.
Great. And we look forward to continuing the conversation on these topics. We're going to drill down more because, I actually made it a point on my study on each of these modules that I have to go out and read the, top 5 books on those, or look at the top people on those. And because it really takes depth and, to continue to learn. And you guys are the ones who taught me how to do that, but with that, thanks so much, Pradnya, for coming on. And Cory, we'll pick up some of that other stuff next week. Welcome back from Disneyland. So good to have you back. And thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks so much, Pradnya, for coming on. And we'll look forward to our new Visionary Business Leader series. And it's an honor to have you as our first one, Pradnya.
What a pleasure. Thank you very much for this opportunity to serve. Have a great day, guys.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, I'll let you go. I got to jump onto the director meeting.